Good morning.
Good morning. There we go. Thank you.
So I want to start this off by telling you all a story about deodorant. Raise your hand if you put on deodorant this morning. A bunch of you are slobs. Come on. Why didn't you put the deodorant on? Well, what you may not have thought about, though, is why you put on deodorant and why we even have a deodorant in the first place. And if it wasn't for a teenage entrepreneur named Edna Murphy in the 1910s, it wouldn't even exist. And let me explain why. Back in the early 1900s, this is how you dealt with sweat. Literally, dress shields and cotton pads under your dresses and under your shirts. There were deodorants and antiperspirants at the time, but no one actually used them. And there were two main reasons why. The first is because people thought it was unhealthy to use a deodorant or an antiperspirant. And second, and more importantly, it was taboo to discuss anything related to body odors or bodily fluids. It was a Victorian era sort of thing. It was not something you discussed or advertised. So what happened was, years ago, this girl, Edna Murphy, her father created an antiperspirant for surgeries. He was a doctor. And she realized, oh, I could use it for my armpits. And what she decided to do was try to package it and sell it as a thing called Odor-O-No. That's literally what it was called, Odor-O-No. And she started trying to sell it, and she found that she had a difficulty selling it because of these two barriers I talked to you about the health issue and, more importantly, about the taboo of discussing body odor. And so she decided to start tackling this issue by working with another guy, James Webb Young, who would eventually become the first chairman of the Advertising Council, to go directly against these frames of reference people had about deodorants. The first one was to discuss how do you get people to understand it's not going to kill you to wear deodorant. And that one was actually shockingly simple. It was the fact that a doctor had invented the product that they advertised. And this was one of the original advertisements, discussing how Odor-O-No is used and recommended by leading physicians and skin specialists. The second problem was the bigger one, how to get people to actually discuss deodorant. And so what they did was they put out this ad in about the late 1910s. And it was an ad called "Within the Curve of a Woman's Arm, a frank discussion of a subject too often avoided." And this was published in the leading magazine at the time, Ladies' Home Journal, of course. And what happened was they discussed this. Shall we discuss it frankly? Does excessive perspiration ruin your prettiest dresses? Seems pretty tame for the time, but back then, that was controversial. Hundreds of women canceled their Ladies' Home Journal subscriptions in protest of the ad. But the result was that people were now discussing body odor, and the taboo had been broken. These angry people, representing the people who canceled their subscriptions. The next year, Odor-O-No sold $417,000 of their product, which today is worth approximately $5.889 million. And by the next decade, Edna Murphy sold her company for millions. And so nowadays, deodorant is an $18 billion market. And so the questions I have for you are, why did Odor-O-No capture attention? And more importantly, what can we learn from Odor-O-No, and how can we apply those lessons today? And that's some of the kind of things that I looked into during my research for Captivology. So, as we probably all already know, we're pretty much like Doug the dog. Who's seen the movie Up? Some of you need to go to the theater. It's a great movie. But if you know the dog Doug from Up, he's like walking around and suddenly he's like, "Squirrel!" But that's how we all are now. We are distracted constantly. We have so much information going at us. In 1986, about 40 newspapers worth of information was presented to us daily. By 2006, it was 176 newspapers worth. In the next 10 years, that number is going to only skyrocket. There's just much more information coming to us now than ever, thanks to social media, YouTube, and the dissemination and the democratization of content. And we haven't done ourselves any favors either. Multitasking has been a thing that we've been doing more, but in fact, multitasking is bad for us. They had a study that one researcher did, and they found that people who were labeled as heavy multimedia multitaskers were among the worst at both executing tasks in an efficient manner and switching tasks. So a combination of we have more information than ever, and we have made habits that make our management of that information worse. How do you, as the entrepreneur or the executive or the artist, get the attention of users and others? And so that's the kind of thing I discuss in my book that comes out next March. And I wanted to share just a little bit of some of the lessons, 2 of the lessons specifically, that I learned throughout my research with you now. So let's talk about number 1, leveraging experts. It's a scientific fact that we pay attention to the people that we perceive as experts. And there's a couple reasons why. There was a study done by researchers at Emory University. And what they did was they put fMRIs on the brains of students. And they asked them to make economic decisions, make a decision about how to spend their money. And as you would imagine, the critical thinking decision centers of their brains lit up like beacons as they were trying to make this decision. But in half the studies, they had a professor of economics come in and give a piece of advice as an expert on how to manage their money. He would always give the conservative advice. And what they found was, and these are the actual scans from the research study, what they found was that the decision-making centers of the brain, when you're listening to an expert, literally shut down. It's as if you offload the processing power of your brain to the expert. And in a funny way, it makes sense, because we are not all doctors, we're not all scientists, and it makes sense for us to trust people that we perceive as experts, and thus why we listen to them and we pay attention to them. It's a phenomenon known as directed deference. There was even another study where if you put a lab coat or a doctor's coat on somebody, they will have better attention, sharper accuracy, and make less mistakes when you give them tasks. If you put the same coat on them and you tell them it's a painter's coat, their accuracy and their expertise will drop down again. It's merely the perception of expertise that makes us pay attention more. And if I haven't convinced you yet of the power of experts, this is from Edelman. This is the percentage of who people trust the most. It's the trust barometer. And as you can see, the number 1 most trusted source of information is not CEOs or government officials. It's academics or experts. CEOs go way down to the bottom. Oderono, as you can see, probably now understand, used and leveraged experts with their advertising discussing how physicians were using it and physicians recommended it. Same reason why you see 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this or that, because it works, because we trust the word of an expert. And there's ways to use that in your own company, in your own startup. So First Round Capital, I like what they do with this thing called First Round Review, where they discuss issues, and they have experts in those topic areas discuss issues that entrepreneurs want to talk about. So they have probably one of the greatest experts in creativity, the president of Pixar, discussing how to make creativity, and they have those types of things. But even a brand can become an expert. And you look right here, Mint.com, which was acquired by Intuit several years ago, did a great job of establishing itself as an expert in personal finance by having these types of articles discussing financial tips. Not even discussing, Mint.com, just financial tips. And it helped establish them as an expert. So when customers came to them, they were automatically paying attention and had directed deference. So I have one more lesson to share from the book. Number 2, reframing the conversation. My second piece of advice. There's a phenomenon known as the framing effect, which is that when we can perceive something entirely differently based on our frame of reference. And let me give you an example from a famous study. There's a famous study where they had students rate a car crash that they had to view on video. But then they would ask them with just one word change, at which speed were the cars colliding? And in that case, it was about 32 miles per hour was the average, what the students would say was the speed at which the cars collided. But when they said, at which speed did the cars smash into each other, it went up to 41 miles per hour. And that's like a 22% difference, based purely on a single word change. And so it's very clear that we pay attention based on how we see and perceive the world and the way in which information is presented to us. A different example, a more modern example. Does anyone know who that is? Oh, you guys, we need more music junkies here. His name is Joshua Bell. He's a world-famous violinist, Emmy Award winner. Several years ago, he did a famous experiment with the Washington Post, where he was in the middle of the subway playing for an hour in Washington, D.C. 1,070 people walked by him. Anyone want to guess how many people stopped to listen to him for more than a minute? 7. 7 people stayed for more than a minute. And this is one of the world's greatest violinists. But why? Why didn't people want to listen? Well, it was about the frame of reference. He was standing during rush hour right next to the entrance when people are not in the mindset of listening to music but trying to get to work. And instead of him being on stage like I am now, he was just like in the side of the subway. And we're already coached to not pay attention to the people that are playing on the side of the subway. But so that's what happens. Nobody cares. I had the pleasure of meeting a different violinist, though. Her name is Susan Kessler, and she plays regularly on the streets of New York City. And she's actually able to attract crowds of 80 or more in Central Park and in the subway stations. The reason why is because she's taken years to understand her audience frames of reference. She only plays after rush hour and before 2 o'clock, and she plays only in places where there are long hallways so that her audience has 10 to 15 seconds to listen to her as they walk by, making it more likely that they'll actually stop to listen. And she makes sure that she shows what she's playing so that people get more involved. And she's been able to make a living off of this. And so this woman who is not, an Emmy Award winner is able to draw crowds much larger than Joshua Bell, who typically sells out stadiums. Oder Ono understood this lesson as well. In their case, what they did was they had to reframe the conversation by starting the conversation in the first place. No one was discussing body odor. They decided to take a risk and say, we're going to attack this head on. And as a result, not only did they get attention for discussing deodorants, antiperspirants, and body odor, but other companies started discussing it as well. This is Mum. This was one of their main competitors. And now suddenly, after the Oder Ono ad, others started putting out these kinds of ads as well, discussing body odor, making it more and more okay to discuss, making the overall size of the market of antiperspirants much bigger, which was great for everyone, but especially for Oder Ono. You see this kind of phenomenon as well for things like Google does it very well. So you probably maybe remember when Gmail first came out, there was people paying thousands of dollars for invites. And even now, when I posted I had invites for inbox, I had 500 people emailing me trying to get these things. It's artificial scarcity. They reframed it as a thing that is scarce, and it made people pay much more attention to it than they would have otherwise if you just offered it straight out. That's why you see invite systems work out so well. And this phenomenon even works in real life in terms of Twinkies, for example, in retail. I don't know if you all remember, who likes Twinkies? You're terrible people. Twinkies are disgusting. But when Twinkies went out of business and they were all about to go away, people bought them in droves and the sales skyrocketed. And it was not because the Twinkies got any better, they're still terrible, but it became a hot commodity because it was so scarce. And it reframed the way we saw Twinkies. And as a result, we started buying them in droves. And so those are just two of the many lessons that I learned throughout the book that I wanted to share with you in order to capture attention by leveraging experts and reframing the conversation in your favor. And unfortunately, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I don't have all the time in the world to go through all of the things that I learned, which is why I wrote a book about it that comes out next March. You can pre-order that. I'm required by HarperCollins to go and promote the hell out of it. I apologize. But I promise you that you will learn more of those lessons and how to apply them, whether you're an entrepreneur trying to get the attention of users, or you're an artist or a teacher trying to get the attention of fans or students. And I really go into the scientific phenomena of it and how you apply it in real life. And so I just want to say, this is my contact info if you want to find me. And thank you very much.